It happens every evening at 5 p.m. He packs his bag and asks, "What time is the train?" You sigh, rubbing your tired eyes. You've answered this exact question 10 times today already. The burden of caregiving isn't just physical exhaustion. It's the crushing weight of constantly repeating reality. So, you try logic. "Dad, there is no train," you say. "You are home. You live here." You show him the living room, the photos, the familiar walls. You try to anchor him to the present, but your logic doesn't comfort him. It only builds a thick wall of confusion between you two. He looks at you, not with understanding, but with a sudden, sharp flash of anger. Because to his fading mind, your truth sounds like a lie, a cruel trick meant to disorient him. This is the painful trap for caregivers. We desperately believe that correcting them will protect them, but pulling someone with dementia forcefully back into our present often causes them deep, terrifying anxiety. The thick, messy scribbles of your daily stress clash with the fading, erased lines of his memory. You are both trapped in this exact same room, yet living in two completely different time zones. The more you argue with cold facts, the further he drifts away into the fog. What if the goal isn't to force him to remember the facts, but to understand his feelings? Because behind his illogical question lies a profound, unspoken emotional need. Psychologists call it ambiguous loss. It is the strange, heavy grief of mourning someone who is still sitting right in front of you. You watch them breathe. You hold their hands. But the person you knew is slowly being erased by an invisible hand. Every forgotten name, every repeated question feels like another cruel stroke of a heavy, relentless eraser. It wipes away decades of shared history, leaving behind smudged graphite and confusing, terrifying empty spaces. And it is not just painful for you. Imagine waking up every day in a world where the details are constantly shifting. The faces you should trust look like strangers. The home you built feels like a waiting room in a foreign station. When you try to correct his reality with facts, you aren't bringing him back. You are pulling him away from his only safe ground. To him, your facts are just loud, aggressive noises in a room that is already too overwhelming to navigate. He does not need a reality check. He needs an emotional anchor. He needs to know he isn't entirely lost. We fight the disease with logic because it gives us a false sense of control over an uncontrollable decline. But logic is a language his fading mind can no longer translate. It only amplifies the profound isolation. Underneath the confusion, the frustration, and the repeating questions, there is a silent plea for connection. In Japan, they call this deep, unspoken need Amae, the desire to lean on someone's love unconditionally. When the adult armor falls away, what remains is an inner child, terrified of the encroaching dark. To reach him, you have to stop speaking the language of facts and start speaking the language of the lost mind. Think about the times he flatly refused your help, the moments he lashed out over a simple meal. It is so easy to label this behavior as stubbornness, to feel hurt and to push back with frustration. We often think to ourselves, why is he making this so incredibly hard for me? But look closer. If you look closely at the heavy, dark lines of his stubbornness, you will see they are trembling. That thick wall of defiance isn't built from malice. It is built from absolute, sheer, paralyzing panic. Dementia is a thief. Every single day, it steals a tiny piece of his autonomy and his identity. Imagine the terror of feeling the steering wheel of your own life slowly dissolving right out of your hands. When he shouts, "No!" or refuses to cooperate, he is making a desperate attempt to reclaim control. His anger is just the loudest manifestation of his fear. It is a shield made of incredibly fragile pride. For a man who spent his entire life providing and protecting, becoming completely dependent on others is truly terrifying. The proud father you knew is using anger to protect the vulnerable, frightened soul trapped inside. If we attack that shield with logic and arguments, we only force him to hold it tighter. Instead of standing opposite him as an opponent, we must learn to stand beside him in the fog. You don't need to break his armor. You just need to show him that he doesn't need to wear it. When the threat of being corrected disappears, the panic subsides, and the lost mind can finally rest. In Japanese psychology, there is a word for this deep, primal longing: Amae. It is the unspoken desire to depend on another's love. As dementia strips away the adult layers of logic and independence, what remains is that pure, raw need for safety. He cannot simply say, "I am terrified, please hold me." His fading vocabulary simply won't allow it anymore. Instead, he might ask about his long-deceased mother, or desperately pack his bags for a train that left decades ago. These are not delusions you need to cure. They are metaphors. He is simply saying, "I want to feel safe again." Think back to when you were a small child, waking up in the dark after a terrible nightmare. Did your father pull out a medical chart to prove the monster wasn't real? No. He just held you. Now, the roles have completely reversed. The strong hands that once anchored your world are trembling. He is standing in the dark of his own fading mind, surrounded by shadows he no longer recognizes. When you try to force him into your bright, logical reality, the glare only blinds him further. To practice Amae is to let him lean on you, without demanding that he first prove he makes sense. It requires you to set aside your need to be right and prioritize his need to feel secure. You become his emotional anchor, not his fact-checker. You validate his feelings, not his geography. When you finally embrace this, the heavy burden of caregiving begins to shift. It changes from a battle into a bridge. And for the first time in a long time, the fog clears just enough for both of you to breathe. When you learn to speak the language of Amae, you give them the peace they so desperately seek. But as he finally rests, you must step back out of that sanctuary and return to the cold reality. Being the emotional and physical anchor for a fading mind comes at a staggering, often invisible cost. In Japan, this profound, soul-crushing exhaustion has a name: Kaigo Tsukare, Caregiver Burnout. You wear a brave face. You practice gammon, the quiet, stoic endurance of unbearable things. It is the agonizing split between tatemae, your strong outward facade, and honne, your breaking true feelings. The cultural expectation that family must silently bear this entire burden alone often creates a suffocating cage. This complete isolation breeds a terrifying condition known as Kaigo Utsu, or caregiving depression. Research shows that without the ability to step back and create distance from caregiving, your mental health simply collapses. You are drowning in a sea of responsibilities, entirely consumed by the endless needs of another human being. And slowly, a terrifying realization hits you in the quiet moments. You are losing your own identity too. While the disease relentlessly erases his memories, the heavy, silent weight of caregiving is actively erasing you. You have become his entire world, his only anchor. But in this vast, lonely ocean, who is anchoring you? To survive this, you must confront the hardest truth of all. You cannot carry the entire sky alone. Asking for help is never a sign of failure. It is the first courageous step toward true healing. As you finally allow others to support you, your own fragmented pieces begin to slowly mend. In Japan, there is an ancient art called Kintsugi. It is the practice of repairing broken pottery with pure gold. The philosophy is beautiful. The breakage and the repair become part of the history, making the piece even stronger. With this renewed, grounded strength, you can begin to practice mimamori, watching over someone warmly without interfering. When he does something completely illogical, like putting a shoe perfectly on the dining table, you no longer rush in with panic to correct him. You pause. You take a breath. You understand that the shoe on the table is not a crisis. It is just a harmless misstep in the fog. By practicing Mimamori, you protect his dignity. You redirect gently, giving him the space to simply be. And when you finally share your burden with a community, professionals, friends, support groups, the suffocating dark cloud of responsibility transforms. It becomes a gentle, nourishing rain. It waters the garden of your shared remaining time, allowing you to simply exist together. His memories will still fade. The dementia will continue its slow, inevitable march. But the terror is gone, replaced by the profound comfort of feeling unconditionally loved in the dark. You have built a bridge of gold over the abyss of memory loss, and neither of you is walking it alone. Even in this peaceful space, you might notice he still carries a heavy, invisible weight on his shoulders. It is the metaphorical backpack of life, filled to the brim with unfulfilled tasks, past traumas, and heavy memories. Instead of trying to forcefully pull it off him, validation therapy suggests we simply sit down and help him unpack it. He pulls out a heavy memory of his old work, driven by a fundamental human need to feel useful and productive. You do not tell him he is retired. You validate the emotion. You tell him how hard he worked and how strong he was. When his past identity is honored and heard, that specific heavy burden simply dissolves into the wind. But then he reaches deeper. He pulls out a darker, more frightening sketch, a past trauma or an unhealed loss. Validation theory states a profound truth. Painful feelings that are ignored, corrected, or suppressed will only grow stronger. But those same painful feelings, when expressed freely to a trusted listener, will finally begin to grow weaker. You do not try to fix the memory. You sit in the dark with him. You become the safe container for his deepest fears. As the fear is validated and released, the terrifying shadows dissolve. The crushing weight is lifted. As you practice this empathy, your own sense of coherence strengthens, helping you manage the profound stress, allowing you to find meaning in the journey, and deeply reducing your own caregiving burden. At the very bottom of that heavy backpack, once the fear is gone, he finds the pure, joyful memories. By validating his past, you do not just ease his fear, you help him find peace in the present. Returning to reality does not mean the mess disappears. It means your perspective shifts. You learn to embrace wabi-sabi, finding profound beauty in the imperfect, the impermanent, and the incomplete. When he wanders through the house, lost in a timeline you cannot see, you no longer drag him back to the harsh present. You gently walk with him in his past. This is the core of validation therapy. You step into his reality, acknowledging his emotional truth without judgment. And in doing so, you restore his sense of safety, his dignity, and his self-worth. There is a Japanese concept called mono no aware, the gentle, wistful pathos of things. It is the quiet, bittersweet acceptance that everything beautiful in this world is fleeting. You know that his mind is fading. You know that this time you share is temporary, but instead of fighting the setting sun, you sit together and watch it fall. The roles have completely reversed, but the love remains exactly the same. The hands that once guided your first steps now rely entirely on you for their last. It is a heavy privilege, a heartbreaking, beautiful honor. Because beneath the exhaustion and beneath the fading memories, there is a profound, unbreakable thread of gold holding you both together. In the twilight of dementia, there is often a natural, profound letting go. This emotional danshari, the art of decluttering, happens not just with physical objects, but with worldly attachments. He no longer needs to know the time, the date, or the rules of the world. Psychologists call this gerotranscendence, a shift from a materialistic view to a peaceful, cosmic perspective. The fear of death and the anxiety of losing control slowly melt away into acceptance. He is preparing for his final transition. And your role shifts one last time. You are no longer a caregiver managing a disease. You are a companion on his final journey. In modern society, one of the greatest fears is kodokushi, the silent tragedy of dying entirely alone. But because you are there, holding his hand, that cold shadow cannot reach him. This profound act of accompanying someone to the very threshold is known as Mitori. Mitori is not about medical intervention. It is the spiritual and emotional care of simply being present. He may no longer remember your name, but the soul never forgets how it feels to be loved. The boundary between his fading mind and the universe begins to beautifully blur. It is a time of profound, quiet sorrow, but also of incredible, transcendent beauty. In the warm, unconditional light of Mitori, the soul is never lost. It simply returns home. When the final departure comes, the silence in the room can feel deafening. The long journey of Kaigo has ended. The journey of grief begins. But because you accompanied him to the very end, your grief is not tainted by the agonizing guilt of caregiving burnout. It is a pure, clean sorrow, a testament to the depth of your unconditional love. The Japanese concept of omoiyari, deep empathy and consideration, ensures something vital. The essence of the person you cared for, the one you validated, never truly disappears. They live on in the patience you learned and the incredible strength you found in the dark. And from this immense loss, a new ikigai, a new reason for being, can quietly bloom. The heavy backpack of life has been unpacked and laid to rest, leaving fertile soil behind. You survived the fog. You navigated the terrifying, fading labyrinth of the mind. You learned to speak the language of the heart when logic and words completely failed. Now it is time to carry that golden light forward into your own healing. To every caregiver watching this, your exhaustion is seen, your pain is valid, and your love is profound. You are not alone, and the gold you are pouring into their cracks is beautiful. The information in this video is for educational and empathetic purposes only. It is not a substitute for professional therapy, medical care, or crisis support. If you or your family are struggling, please reach out to a qualified professional or a trusted support service.